Beautiful. Good morning, church.
Good morning, Jim.
Hey, so if you don't know who I am, I'm Jim. I'm one of the pastors here, and as Pastor Tony said, we are going through a series. It's based on the Alpha course. We're talking about life's big questions, and my hope, my aim throughout all of this is what Peter writes in 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 15, straight into the Bible. No messing about today, are we? Hey, come on, look at this. So 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 15 says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but to do this with gentleness and respect.
Yeah.
And so I really believe that as people of faith, most of us here are people of faith, that when we get asked the tough questions of life, that we can give an answer for the hope that we have for life. And so the aim of this series is to help to equip us with some of the answers, because I don't know about you, but I've been asked some really tough questions during my faith journey, and sometimes I don't always have the answers. And the thing is to equip us with the answers. And the second point that I really want to get to is, for some of us, we just never found out the answers in the first place. Yeah. So, my experience growing up of Christianity wasn't a really positive one. I grew up in a family that was, not very interested in things of faith, and so, of course, I had no framework for these big questions. Big questions like, who is Jesus, and what's this faith all about, and why go to church, and what's my purpose? And so throughout all of that, my experience was just very narrow, and I picked up a load of bad thinking. 2 weeks ago, I talked about the baggage that some of us can pick up. So if I can have a bit of baggage there, please, that'd be great. Right, so going through life, I could understand that. I picked up that Jesus, he's just a good moral teacher. Fine, that's it. Another thing that I could have picked up was, Jesus is just a political rebel. He came and he did stuff that, it was subversive against the Roman government, and that's who he was. Or another thing that I believed was Jesus, he's just a figment of your imagination. He's just a made-up kind of fairy tale. And so I'm carrying this baggage around in my life, and yeah, I can function, I can do stuff, I can move around, it was fine. But I wasn't free. And so my hope is that throughout this series, that some of the baggage that you may have picked up around some of the questions of life, particularly in today's message about who is Jesus, we'll be able to start putting some of these bags down and starting to realise and to understand actually who is this person that we call Jesus. I think too many of us get lost, in our faith journey, and we come to church and we hear the messages and it's great, and you know what? We come to church and we pick up a word from God, don't we? And it's relevant for us right here, right now, in this season of our lives, and we take that and we kind of run with that. But we don't have a foundation for which to build on top of that either. So this church in London, Hope Trinity Brompton, formulated a framework from which to build this foundation called the Alpha course. And if it's something that interests you about discovering more about faith and the fundamentals of faith, I really want to encourage you to go look it up online and to research it. But I've taken some of the principles of it and I'm going to try and bring some of it for us here today, but not quite exactly in the same format as the Alpha course. So, here we go. Who is Jesus? And why is he such a big question in life? Jesus is the reason for our calendar. Jesus is the reason for our government system, He's the reason for our education system. In fact, we've got hospitals. Jesus forms so much of what informs us about the world. We all swim in this goldfish bowl based upon his teachings and who he was and who he is, in fact. And so many of us, we're swimming around in this goldfish bowl, drinking this water and seeing things through this lens without really fully understanding the why of it all. Our value system, our morality, all of it is gone through this filter of who this man Jesus is. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Some of the bags that I'm going to go through, and hopefully, if this is one of the bags that you've picked up in your life about who Jesus is, my hope and my prayer is to help you to let go of some of these bags so that you can pursue life a bit more freely. So, first off, he's not a figment of imagination or a mental construct. So many people believe this. Maybe some of you believe this or have believed this. I know that I have believed this in the past before I came to faith. That, do you know what, all this stuff about Jesus is great and all, but it's just a story that people tell their children. It's just a story that people used, just to, teach them about good things. It didn't really exist. It's just a figment of your imagination. But no, because if he was just a figment of people's imagination, why would there be so much evidence around who this man was? You see, back in the day, back in the Roman times, they thought themselves to be pretty well educated. They thought themselves to know their stuff. And so they had people, educators, as did the Greeks, the philosophers, and they had schools that taught the elite, the rich, about things of life and constructs of life. And there came a point where the Roman historians, they had to start including Jesus. They had to start doing their history. And so there's a Roman historian, well, there's a couple of them. There's quite a lot of them, in fact, actually. Quite a lot of Roman historians, but one in particular, Tacitus, said this, that all human efforts, all lavish gifts of the emperor and the propitiations of the gods did not banish the sinister belief that the conflagration was the result of an order. What he's talking about here, in plain English, is that there was a time when Emperor Nero, he got the ump with Christians, so he decided to get rid of them, because he blamed the Christians for the trouble that was going on in Rome. This is around about the 70s AD. And so he burnt the city to the ground, and he pinned the blame on the Christians. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, Jesus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus. And the most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out, not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where there became many more believers. What Tacitus is doing here is, he's done his history. It's like there's been a trouble in the city of Rome. All this has happened. And Nero, he needed a scapegoat. So he decided to pin the blame on this man Jesus. And we know about this man Jesus because, well, Pontius Pilate, one of our guys was there, and one of our guys killed him on the cross. This is evidence of Jesus' actual existence. Yeah. It's not just Tacitus, though. There's another guy called Suetonius, and there's Pliny the Elder, and there's plenty of other examples. Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, he wrote about the thing that grew up in this area called Christianity. And he wrote about these things so that the people reading this of the time, they could go and research it for themselves. Not very far removed from the actual events themselves. Yeah. You see, 2,000 years later down the line, it's very easy just to say he's a figment of our imagination, but back in the day, if you was reading this firsthand, well, you could go and speak to an eyewitness and discover, actually, was this true? Yeah. And of course the answer would be, well, yes. Jesus did walk the earth, he was a man, and he did do many of these things. But the Bible can be taken as a primary source of evidence within itself. Yeah. You see, before it was all compiled together in a book like this, I'm sorry, this is going to be a bit like a lecture this morning.
Good.
Are we all right with that?
Yeah,
all right, really?
Yeah.
This is my jam here.
Yeah.
So this book that got compiled together about 3 centuries, 4 centuries after the time of its writing, or the New Testament's writing, it was just a collection of manuscripts and scrolls that every synagogue had of the Old Testament, the old Jewish covenant. And then, of course, the letters that Paul wrote and that Luke wrote, the letters that we call the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. These things went out to lots of different churches all around the known world of the time, all around the Mediterranean rim. Yeah. And so they were known, they were letters of good repute. Now, people might not have believed everything that was contained within the letters, but the facts of the story couldn't be disputed. Yeah. And there's so many copies made of these letters so shortly after they was first written, it's incredible. I mean, if I could have included all the statistics, but it is absolutely mind-blowing that we can read the story of Alexander the Great, and actually the first records of his existence that we have today are about 900 years removed from the event. Wow. So of course, yes, they've been copied, but the first evidence of it actually being recorded is almost 1,000 years after it actually happened. Wow. Who knows what whispers could have been spoken of during that time. With the Bible, the letters, Paul's letters particularly, and the Gospel of John, written about 30 years after the events. Wow. And there are hundreds, thousands of copies, all within a very short framework of time. It's absolutely mind-boggling. So, some of the things that tell us about that is not just a figment of our imagination, because we can trust what's in the Bible. But in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to dig a bit deeper into the Bible, its historicity and how it came about and all that kind of stuff. I like that kind of stuff. But some of the things that are written there, Luke 24, Luke, the writer, he talks about the fact that there are 2 disciples in their way to a place called Emmaus, and on this road, they met Jesus. Yeah. They met him, they saw him. They was down with it. They're like, Joe, what? We actually met this guy. Later on, in John writes, and John was like one of Jesus' disciples, John writes that Jesus first appeared to a lady called Mary, which in itself is scandalous, absolutely scandalous, because if you was going to write anything that anyone was going to believe, I'm sorry ladies, but back then you would not write that the lady was the first person to have met this man Jesus after the resurrection. You just wouldn't have done it. Culturally, ladies were considered second-class citizens. So if you wanted to be believed, if you wanted to be taken seriously, you wouldn't have included a lady. I'm glad things have changed, aren't you?
Come on.
Yeah, we're living in a better day. And you know what? We can thank this man Jesus for that, but that's another story for another day. In 1 Corinthians, Paul writes that Jesus appeared to more than 500 people at the same time. Now, some people might push back and say, it's just hallucinations. But no rave has had 500 people tripping out seeing the same thing at the same time. It's just never happened. It's just not a fact of life, is it? Now, 1 or 2 people might hallucinate, and maybe 3 or 4 people might hallucinate the same thing. So it's privy of the same conversations and the same background, but no way are there 500 people in the same moment hallucinating the same thing. Yeah. Scientifically impossible. Who is this guy, Jesus? It's not just a figment of imagination or a mental construct. Jesus is not just a good moral teacher. Though we do derive much of our understanding of morality from his teachings, of course. But you'll hear this, that Jesus is just there to teach our children the difference between right and wrong. But a good moral teacher doesn't do things like destroying a village's economy. For example, in Mark 5, we read the story of how he went across a lake and there was demons in a man, so he sent the demons out of the man into the pigs. Now the Jews didn't like pigs, they didn't eat pigs, but these people on the other side of the lake, they like pigs, they enjoyed a bacon sandwich in the morning. And Jesus obliterates all of that completely. This is someone's livelihood. So, fine, alright. In Luke 5, he allows a group of people to destroy a man's house. Right? There's a guy, a paralytic, on a mat. Jesus is in there teaching the people. And there's this group that climb up onto the roof of this guy's house. Don't know who the guy is, he's never named. And they dig through his roof. Who deals with that? Who pays for that to be repaired afterwards? Who knows? I don't know. And he persistently insults the rich and religious. Just read the Gospels. He is constantly going around telling the religious people that they're just whitewashed tombs, or that the rich people haven't got a place in this kingdom of heaven because they're not willing to let go of their stuff. Yeah. They're not willing to let go of their baggage. A person that's just a good moral teacher doesn't do stuff like that. I don't think so. Jesus is more than that. So people that say that he's just a good moral teacher, I'm sorry, he's not a stereotypical guru, is he? It's not like Muhammad or Buddha or any of the others. Without Jesus, there is no Christianity. But without Muhammad, Islam still exists. Without Buddha, Buddhism still exists. Because their teaching is based upon a worldview, based upon a construct. Whereas Christianity is based upon a man. This man, Jesus. Without Jesus, it all falls apart completely. Jesus is not a magician, although he does perform miracles. In John, he changes water into wine, he heals many people, he drives out demons, he raises the dead even, he feeds thousands, and he walks on water. But people might say, well, he's just a magician, isn't he? Doing all this stuff, right? Dynamo can do these amazing things. David Copperfield, for an old-timey reference, he can do all these things. But no, because what Jesus' miracles do, they're not just there to be like, wow, look at this guy, what a performer. What a great performance, Jesus. Oh, I love this. Yeah, very good. His miracles mean stuff. Yeah. His miracles point to the whole message of what he's come to earth for. Points towards new creation. It points toward a day where there's going to be no more tears. Yeah. That there will be sovereignty over all creation for us as well. It's not just him that will have sovereignty over creation, calming storms and letting the waves subside. There'll be a day where we have that sort of power. And his miracles ultimately demonstrate the fact that death has no power over us. He raises men from the dead. Lazarus was going to die anyway. I mean, how many of us know that happens? Yeah. Right? It's all going to happen to us all some point or another. So why raise a man from the dead if that's just going to be his fate anyway? It's a pointer towards a greater reality. Yeah. Jesus was not just a political rebel. He was not just a guy that wanted to upset the status quo. The Romans really weren't very interested in Palestine. It was a bit of a backwater. They had no real great resources apart from the temple. That was it. That was all the Romans were interested in. They took their money off of them. Yeah, sure, fine, but it wasn't the richest area in the world. There's greater places with greater wealth, like Britain, where you could extract, your tin and your minerals and stuff like that and make yourself wealthy. Palestine just didn't really have any of that. But Jesus did attract political rebels. One of his disciples, Simon, is described as Simon the Zealot, and the Zealots was a political movement of the time. Much like there was a few of them dotted around. The zealots wanted to bring down the Romans, those fed up with that, and we'll get to more of that in a second. But he did attract these sorts of people, but he wasn't here just to upset the Romans. He wasn't here, well, he was here to upset everyone, I think, actually. You know, he turned the world upside down. This guy, Jesus, phenomenal. I mean, who is this Jesus, anyway? He told us that his kingdom is not of this world. His purpose in his humanity here was to manifest and demonstrate God's justice, holiness, and kingdom living here on earth with an anticipation for a future new earth. Yeah. It wasn't just about politics, no. So much more than that. And a couple more bags to put down, but he's not in everything living. I think a few years ago, this was probably more of a relevant idea that was going around in culture and society, that, you know, God is in everything, that God is in the plants, and he's in the trees, and he's in the very air that we breathe. But this isn't Jesus. That idea is something that's called Pantheism. If you think of the film Avatar, that is that worldview. You know, that the tree interconnects with every other living being in the film, if you've ever seen it. And so it's the tree that gives everything life. No, I mean, the Bible, it teaches us that through Jesus, everything gets its breath. We have our breath because of Jesus, because of God's breath coming through, his ruach, his spirit, the thing that is the animating life force of humanity. This is what Jesus is in, but he's not in the trees. No. The CO2 and the oxygen is in the trees, and he created it that way for us to breathe it. Yes, he did. But God is not in the oak tree or the birch. God is not in the soil. He's not the minerals that cause the tomato plants to grow. No. He gives the rain and he gives the sun. He puts these systems in place for these things to happen, but he is not in them. It is not him. Yeah. He creates them. And lastly, he's not just an ideology to be found in all humans. And neither was he purely God, visiting earth to satisfy himself, which would have been an idea that they held in the writings of the New Testament. We call it Gnosticism. Because they had figures like Zeus to think about, to derive their worldview, their ideas from, written by a man called Homer, who was a poet. And his poets shaped much of the Greek world. So a lot of people had these ideas that Jesus, he's just like Zeus. You know, he's this God figure that comes down to earth. And Zeus did some not very nice things. You know, he wasn't a great character. He wasn't a fine, upstanding God that you could look to derive your sense of justice and holiness from. No, he just did what he pleased all of the time. If you pleased him, well, then you was blessed. If you displeased him, well, then you was dead. But this isn't Jesus. Jesus came from heaven to earth to be fully God, fully human, and to walk amongst us, to help us to let go of the baggage of religious ideas, to be a man that we could follow, to be everything that we need to live an abundant life. He did it all perfectly. He lived life perfectly. The record of his writings and his teachings and the biographies of his life show us what it is that he did and how he did it. So he is our example to follow. But we need to let go of the baggage of who maybe we thought this man Jesus was. The cultural background of the time in Palestine was a time of political and religious unrest. Yes, it was. A couple of centuries before, the Greeks had Hellenized the known world under the rule of Alexander the Great. His empire stretched thousands of miles. And so after his death, his kingdom got split into 4 separate states. And so the Jewish people, they were coming back from the time of exile, when these states were being formed and made. They'd been sent out of the land of Palestine, and they was living around Syria and modern-day Iraq and Iran. And they was just coming back to a time of knowing their homeland again. And then the Greeks come along and take over everything and start teaching them these different ideas, these different worldviews, these different gods. Like Zeus and Hercules and all the other great Netflix films that we watch. And they took on a lot of these ideas because, do you know what, the Greeks, they had it good. Do you know what, they had gymnasiums where you could go and work out and get fit. They had great thought and philosophy that expanded our minds and educated us. They had systems for great governance. They had it all. That was brilliant. And so a lot of Jewish people took it on for themselves. And then the Romans came along. Oh, the Romans. What did the Romans ever do for us? They came, they took away a lot of Greek thought, but of course remnants remained. And they instituted their own worldviews and their own gods. And they subjugated the Jewish people. And yeah, they let them have their priests and they let them keep their temple. But they ruled with a much stronger, with a much harder fist than what the Greek ruling elite did. So people were fed up. We had our own state, we had our own kings just a few centuries ago. And since that time, since the exile, God has been silent. Come on, priests, what's going to happen? When's God going to speak again? The Greeks come in. Where is God? He's left us. Then the Romans come in. Really, where is God? He's left us. He's abandoned us. We're in this world now where we're having to pay our temple tax because that's the right and good thing to do, mandated by God and His law. But we're having to pay Caesar tax, and we don't like Caesar. It's time for change. So then a priest called Pantheism, he had enough, he got fed up, and he gathered together a band of brothers, most of them his kids. But then they started to gather other people, and they had a small army, and they had a revolt. And he was like, yeah, we're going to do this. And they defeated the Romans. Oh, victorious. So good. But it didn't last. It didn't last. The Romans, with their might of power, they just came along and they put down this movement. It lasted just a couple of generations. It's so sad. Where is God? Still. So when this idea of a Messiah came along, as they read about in their Old Testament, they knew that there was this Messiah figure who was going to come along, and they're like, yes, this Messiah. But who was the Messiah? What did they think he was? Who is he supposed to be? Well, they expected a Messiah, which means anointed one, set apart by God to do something. That he was supposed to be a king, a warrior king, much like David from the Old Testament. That's what they wanted. That's what they expected. And he was going to come along and he was going to lead the people in a revolt against the current rule. And they was going to have their own nation again. They was going to be their own people again. Yes, we're going to be free from the tyranny. We're going to have our own king like the days of past. And others, they had the notion of a priestly Messiah. One of the line of Aaron, you know, Moses' brother from like way back when in the time of Exodus. And maybe he's going to be a warrior king, but maybe there'll be another one like Aaron. So we're going to have a warrior king defeat the Romans, and then we're going to have an Aaron Messiah figure come in and lead us into the ways of God again. King Josiah from the Old Testament was considered to be a Messiah, you know. In fact, a non-Jewish person, King Cyrus of the Babylon, or the Persians even, he was considered to be a Messiah. But they wanted their nation back. So when this idea that a Messiah was going to come along, when John, the baptizer, he's out there and he's like, oh, the Messiah's coming, I'm here just to pave the way for the Messiah. And they got excited. They're like, yes, we've got an idea, we've got a construct of what this Messiah's going to be. We know what's coming. Yeah, love this. We've got to get it back again. But that's not what happened, is it? So, what did the people of Jesus' time, who did they think he was? We've got an expectation of what they thought he should be. But when he was walking the earth, things changed again. So in Luke chapter 9, it reads this, that once, when Jesus was praying in private and his disciples were with him, he asked them, who do the crowds say that I am? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, that one of the prophets of long ago has come back to life. This is who the people thought Jesus was. One of the prophets, you know. He's a good guy. He's going to teach us the things of God. Very nice. Mark 3 says that when his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he is out of his mind. His family thought he was crazy. That's what they thought of Jesus. In Matthew 9 it says, but the Pharisees said, the religious people said, it is by the prince of demons that he drives out demons. Wow. The religious folk that thought he was the devil. Mm. Who is Jesus? Yeah. Peter said in Luke 9, when asked by Jesus, what about you, he asked, who do you say I am? Peter answered, God's Messiah. Yeah. Oh! Fantastic. Lots of conflicting ideas about who Jesus was though, isn't there? So who is Jesus? I mean, who did Jesus himself even claim to be? Well, in John 10, Jesus says that I and the Father are one. And again, his Jewish opponents picked up stones to stone him. But Jesus said to them, I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of these do you stone me? We are not stoning you for any good work, they replied, but for blasphemy, because you, a mere man, claim to be God. Yeah. What a bold claim. Mm-hmm. What a bold claim. I mean, would any of you ever claim to be God? Mm-mm. In John 8, Jesus replied, if I glorify myself, my glory means nothing. My Father, whom you claim as your God, is the one who glorifies me. Though you do not know him, I know him. If I said I did not, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him and obey his word. Your father Abraham, the key bit there, Father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. And they said, but you're not yet 50 years old. And have you seen Abraham? And he says, very truly, I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born, I am. Wow. At this, they picked up stones to stone him. But Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds. You can see that Jesus claimed to be pre-existent, that he claimed to be eternal, that even before Abraham, who lived several thousand years ago, existed, I was there. And of course, they understood this in the day. It's something for us that we might read that and just very easily skip over it. It's another very bold claim that he claims to be God and that he claims to be eternal. Who is Jesus? In John 14, John, I've got to get John in here tonight. John 14, Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you'll know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. seen me. You've seen God. Man. This is who he says that he is. So who is Jesus? I mean, so you can see that the testimony of his life, it's a mixed bag, isn't it? It's a mixed bag. So many people have so many different ideas and thoughts about who he was. Was he just a political zealot come to overturn the current rule? Was he a Messiah of the line of David, or a Messiah of the line of Aaron? Was he who he claimed to be? Was he actually the Son of God?
He was.
So why do we still talk of this man 2,000 years later? And why is it that a third of our world still worships him as God? Well, for that, we need to look at the thing that he did that proved that he was who he claimed to be. That he died and he resurrected. But we're going to talk about that in 2 weeks' time.
Brilliant.
So, who is Jesus? I'm sure that for many of us, we came into the room with our thoughts and ideas of who we thought that he was. Maybe we've got some baggage from our past of who he thought that he was. And maybe it's time to let go of some of those bags. Maybe it's time for us to take that step and go, do you know what? It's been interesting what you said, Jim, this morning. Intriguing. I want to know more. I want to find out more about who Jesus really is. We're going to cover a lot of ground over the next couple of months, talking about these big questions. Who is Jesus? Why did he die? What is my purpose here? What is this book, the Bible, all about? But if you want to come and talk to myself, Pastor Tony, or any, do you know what? Come and speak to us if you want to find out a bit more. But for right now, we're going to leave it there. We're going to pray. Yeah, Father God, we thank you that we get together and be your people, God, and learn something about who you are. We thank you, Jesus, for the legacy that you've left us, that we have this world, this society that is good on the whole because of you. The Lord, we know and we understand that it's not enough just to live in this society and to draw our ideas of who you are from it. We need to come to the source of our truth. We need to come to the source of all truth, your word. And we know that it is reliable and it is trustworthy and it is true, for it is tried and tested over millennia. So Father, if any of us here today are struggling with who Jesus is, I pray, God, that you just open that curtain, if just for a tiny crack, to let us see the truth of who you are. For others, I pray, God, that curtain is just pulled wide open and that the light will just shine in. Father, I'm so glad and thankful to get to teach this sort of stuff. And I pray, God, that it's been helpful to some, at least. In Jesus' name, amen. 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 So, hey, question for you to wrestle with as you go through the week. Come speak to us if you want to. But until that next time that we get to gather together and talk about God's word, let's just grab some tea and coffee, hang out, be church, right? God bless you guys.